In this video, we are comparing two popular surfaces for oil painting. On the left, I have applied the Universal Studio Gesso from Pébéo, and on the right, I have used the Michael Harding Non-Absorbent primer. Let's explore how they differ in texture and application and how they might affect your painting experience. During the application, I immediately noticed a difference in consistency. The Universal Gesso is more fluid, while the Michael Harding primer has heavier and creamier body. This allows you to dilute it up to 25% water to adjust its consistency. I applied 2 layers, and for the second layer, I didn't dilute the products at all. Also, I deliberately didn't smooth out the applied layers too much, so we can see how drying affects the texture. Let's take a look at the texture after a day of drying. The non-absorbent primer seemed to retain its application texture a bit more than the Universal Gesso, which appeared to settle more into the surface. For me, that means that the non-absorbent primer is a bit more versatile. You can dilute it for a smoother finish or apply it thicker for more texture depending on what you want. The Universal Gesso also dried slightly yellowish and darker in tone. Let's apply a wash of burnt umber and see if we can erase it. If we can completely remove the thin layer of paint and wipe it back to the white of the canvas using some thinner. This property can be really useful for underpainting, especially if you want to establish highlights and values early on, or for erasing mistakes, of course. I have been using the Universal Gesso for about a year, and I have sometimes struggled with removing paint without leaving a stain. In this demonstration, to my surprise, the fresh paint lifted quite nicely without much staining. So I couldn't see a significant difference between the two surfaces, so I can only speak from my experience that in the past I have struggled with removing and manipulating larger areas, especially after a few days drying, and this was one of my reasons to try a new non-absorbent primer. But in any case, it seems that fresh application can be easily removed from both primers without staining, so that's great. Now I will apply some patches of color, one with thinner, another one with a general medium, and one straight from the tube, both in a smooth thin layer and with a thick impasto. I want to see if these will leave any stains and how the final finish and the color retention will be. After a day of drying, the most noticeable difference between the two primers is the final finish of the paint. Both thinner and thicker paint applications show this difference. On the Universal Gesso, the color dries to a dull matte finish, suggesting that some oil has been absorbed into the surface. This reduces the vibrancy of the color and shortens the drying time. In contrast, the non-absorbent primer demonstrates its purpose. Even after days of drying, the colors look wet and fresh with full vibrancy and a glossy finish. This makes the non-absorbent primer ideal for wet-on-wet painting, even if you take a break for a few days. And it's great for blending. For example, blending was one of my main issues with the Universal Gesso after taking a break for a day or two. So both primers deliver great results, but they serve different purposes depending on your painting style. If you prefer to maintain the wet and fresh look of your paint with glossy and vibrant finishes that don't dull the color, and you enjoy working wet on wet, then it's worth investing a bit more money in the Michael Harding non-absorbent primer. On the other hand, if you want your paint to dry faster and you don't mind a matte finish, and you prefer to work on already dried paint layers, then save your money and go for the Universal Gesso.